Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Adele, and for my topic expansion project, I am going to be talking about a new look at egocentrism. So, earlier in the year, we talked about how egocentrism can affect our listening habits at work. Basically, it's our opinion is better than somebody else's. This can prevent us from listening at work when you are discussing ideas or ways of change. And basically, this can cause lack of listening because you feel that your idea is better than somebody else's. You are basically taking away any other new solutions or problems that arise. So, egocentrism is a belief that our own ideas are more important or valuable than those of others. It represents a cognitive bias in our brains based off the assumption that you and somebody share the same perspective. Whether it's you have the same perspective with somebody or not, it usually looks at how you assume that someone either has the same idea as you, or it causes you to not listen because you view your idea as more important. It also is little to no regard for other individuals' interests, beliefs, or attitudes. Narcissism is a personality disorder in which people have a heightened sense of their own importance, as well as an excessive need for attention. It has a lack of empathy towards others and their ideas and beliefs. Like I said, it can allow people to not engage in active listening, whereas people who have narcissistic traits tend to view themselves as perfectionists and that their ideas are perfect. This could allow somebody to become arrogant and seek perfection. So, the article that I found online, it's from Psychology Today in 2012, called "It's a Fine Line Between Narcissism and Egocentrism" by Susan Cross Whitbourne. She is a professor of psychology and brain sciences at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. In this article, she looks at the different ways egocentrism plays out in our society. She talks about how narcissism is more centered towards our own judgment, and it is more based on our perspective as well as our individual traits. And in the article, she talks about how egocentrism can be controlled through corrective action, which I will discuss later on in this PowerPoint. Egocentrism, according to Whitbourne, refers to the natural restriction of our own perspective caused by the simple fact that we could only see the world from our own perspective. If you've ever engaged in this sort of thinking, I'm sure we all have, to a certain extent with our parents or even our friends, our idea that our skills can only be carried out in a certain way. This takes a special effort to see the world from any perspective other than your own eyes. She talks about how in order to see this, that you should take any skill we know that could be easily carried out. So basically something like riding a bike or, cooking food. She says that it's important to explain it to somebody else who's never attempted it before. She talks about how the fact that egocentrism, people find it difficult to take the perspective of a person who has matured this ability. So basically, what she means by this is that the fact that you are trying to explain to somebody the skill that you've mastered, the chances are that you're actually rather explaining your own perspective rather than the actual task itself. And this could cause somebody to only see your perspective rather than what's actually important. She talks about this cognitive ability of children at the basic level, and that it's hard for children to see the same perspective of another person based off their inability cognitively to think outside the box like adults. Her example that she starts off is by playing the game of checkers. and that since you can't see the board, that children can't see the board like you, so that kids are more than likely will not be able to play the game of checkers as an adult because their cognitive minds aren't developed yet. She discusses how this developmental stage is outgrown when we grow up. She talks about this idea of imaginary audience. Comes from David Alkman, who's a child psychologist. She states that teens' tendencies to envision how friends would react to each of his or her actions and even thoughts. She discussed how YouTube is an example of egocentrism, meaning that the feeling of everybody watching you for a certain purpose. Imaginary audience, like I said, is how people feel the need that people are actually more worried about what's going on with you and that they actually feel embarrassed for you. As adults, we never truly outgrow this youthful form of egocentrism. I myself believe that this is true. There are times where I feel that instead of actually trying to complete the task at hand, that I'm more worried about what's going on outside and feel that everybody has their eyes on you rather than feeling embarrassed. She states that what you fail to recognize is that everyone else feels equally awkward. In fact, they're not looking at you at all because they're so worried about your own performance. This is important towards understanding that we create incorrect assumptions about what other people are feeling or thinking. So egocentrism in society, she talks about the fail to communicate in sufficient detail. For example, you might think that your email that you've sent out to your colleagues in regards to meeting for drinks. So egocentrism could fail to communicate in sufficient detail, meaning that you are the only one understanding where this idea of where you're going to meet and at what time, and that in order for you to not engage in egocentrism, that you can't just mind reading the abilities of other people. Posting content online, she talks about how posting your private verbalizations causes people to actually understand your point. Inside jokes as well is a way that people feel that egocentrism is upon you because you're not letting in outsiders into your engagement, rather than you are just thinking about the insiders of people who have the same sort of jokes as you. An example of this is jumping ahead in line at the grocery store. That situation is only from your point of view, and that you don't pay attention to others' feelings who might see that you're in a hurry, but we don't. Instead, we engage in egocentrism. Because we feel that we're in a hurry, we don't see each other people's point of view. In the end, egocentrism, you're clearly unable to see someone else's point of view. She talks about narcissism, that we see that the point of view but not simply care about it. People engage when failing to see that their own way. Chronic latecomer effect is the idea that people who benefit from showing up late to events, and that since that they don't receive any sort of complications or ramifications, it leads to a constant benefit, and that they won't. And that without consequences, latecomers will not change their behavior. She talks about this narcissistic bubble comes from people who gradually gain public recognition. So what this means is like politicians, your boss, or even people that gain public recognition, and that this grand entrance becomes almost a part of their job. Falling into this mindset then their self-esteem becomes more and more dependent on the position of spotlight, and that this attention becomes a drug, so people who engage in narcissistic behavior are inside this bubble. She talks about 5 pointers towards limiting egocentrism. Make an honest assumption of your egocentric behaviors. Decide what your behaviors are saying about yourself. Find out if you're letting your internal viewpoints skew your social interactions. So see if your behavior in a manner that doesn't reflect the culture of your work group. The second one is to check out how other people feel. Basically what that means is use active, empathetic listening skills, and that broaden your perspective to see other people's point of view. The third point is build up your inner sense of self. What she means by this is find ways to build your self-esteem by finding standards that allow you to reward yourself for your actual accomplishments. An example of this might be to figure out the beauties in life and to take small steps. The fourth way is to squeal your imaginary audience. People half the time don't care about your social blunder. People are not always looking at you, and that your ego is not true importance of everybody. And lastly, she talks about practice counter egocentrism. What she means by this is that to test your abilities to take other people's point of view and explain that the task you may master to yourself. Read over that text to see if you're actually being transparent enough, as well as include outsiders in your inside jokes to lessen your identity of being seen as self-centered. In conclusion, egocentrism is more of a subconscious mindset rather than something we do intentionally, and that narcissistic behavior is an extreme form of egocentrism. So if we could find ways to limit our egocentrism, then we won't engage in narcissistic behaviors.